The auditorium was buzzing with restless energy, a sea of lights and voices swirling in anticipation, as if the very air could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Among the glittering stage lights, the polished microphones, and the watchful cameras stood a boy who looked far too small for the moment. His clothes were simple, worn at the edges, and his shoes carried the scuffs of long journeys walked on foot. His name was Miguel, a boy from a struggling neighborhood where dreams were often silenced before they could even take flight. But tonight, he stood center stage, clutching an old guitar that had been passed down from his late father, a man who had once dreamed of playing in front of thousands but never got the chance. For Miguel, this wasn't just another audition. It was a moment carved out of years of hardship, pain, and hope. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum of destiny, and though his hands trembled slightly, there was a fire in his eyes that no fear could extinguish. The judges looked at him with polite curiosity, and the crowd was still, unsure of what to expect from the boy who seemed so fragile, almost lost beneath the weight of the stage. But when Miguel opened his mouth and strummed the first haunting notes of Hotel California, everything changed. The opening chords floated through the air, soft yet steady, carrying with them a kind of soulfulness that silenced every whisper in the auditorium. His voice, clear, rich, and filled with raw emotion, cut straight through the audience's hearts like a warm blade. It wasn't just a song, it was a confession, a memory, a prayer. People leaned forward in their seats, wide-eyed, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Even the judges, seasoned and used to countless performances, were caught off guard by the purity and depth in his tone. He sang like someone who had lived every line, as if the lyrics were etched into his bones. And perhaps they were, because behind every note Miguel sang was a story, the story of a boy who had grown up listening to his father's guitar late at night, dreaming of something better while the world outside his window felt broken and cruel. His father, once full of laughter and music, had worked endless shifts just to keep food on the table, his guitar often the only comfort in the tiny home they shared. But when illness claimed his father's life, Miguel was left with silence, responsibility, and grief far too heavy for a child. The guitar became his anchor, his only inheritance, and the boy poured all his unspoken emotions into its strings. Singing wasn't just an act for him, it was survival. As the verses of Hotel California carried on, the audience began to sense that this was no ordinary cover. Miguel wasn't trying to mimic anyone, he was telling his truth through the melody, weaving pain, love, and hope together in ways that only someone who had suffered could understand. The haunting refrain, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave," felt like it was coming not from the song itself but from his own soul, a cry from the heart of someone who had lost and yet refused to give up. Tears welled in the eyes of strangers who moments ago had never even known his name. Somewhere in the crowd, a mother clutched her child's hand a little tighter, reminded of the power of love and loss. In the corner of the stage, a camera operator found himself wiping his eyes behind the lens. And the judges, those pillars of authority who had seen it all, began to shift in their seats, their expressions softening, their hearts bending under the weight of his performance. By the time Miguel reached the bridge, something magical happened. His voice cracked, not from lack of skill, but from the unbearable flood of emotion he could no longer contain. For a split second, the auditorium was silent, as if holding its breath, and then he carried on, stronger, braver, pouring every ounce of himself into the final chorus. That crack wasn't weakness, it was truth. And it was that truth that shattered the distance between him and everyone listening. The final notes lingered in the air like incense, heavy and holy, before dissolving into the silence of an audience too stunned to move. Then, slowly, the silence broke into thunderous applause, people rising from their seats, clapping, cheering, some even crying openly. The judges glanced at one another, their faces painted with awe, disbelief, and something deeper, a recognition of greatness. One judge leaned forward, eyes glistening, and whispered, "This boy is singing his soul." Another judge, usually known for being harsh and unyielding, was seen biting their lip, clearly fighting back tears. And then it happened. In perfect unison, as if compelled by something beyond themselves, the judges reached out and slammed the golden buzzer. The auditorium exploded. Golden confetti rained from the ceiling like a shower of blessings, sparkling against the stage lights. Miguel froze, his eyes wide with disbelief, as the world around him erupted into cheers. He clutched his guitar tightly, his lips trembling, as if unable to comprehend what was happening. For the boy who had once sung in the quiet corners of his broken home, who had played to the memory of his father in the dead of night, this was more than victory, it was vindication. Overwhelmed, Miguel fell to his knees as confetti swirled around him, tears streaming down his face, and the judges rushed to the stage, embracing him, whispering words of encouragement he would remember for the rest of his life. But the most powerful moment came not from the applause, the confetti, or the flashing cameras, but from the sight of an older woman standing quietly in the shadows of the audience. She had been there all along, too humble to push forward, yet unable to stay away. It was Miguel's mother. She had worked countless jobs to keep him clothed and fed, sacrificing everything, silently praying that one day her son's voice would be heard. As their eyes met across the chaos of celebration, Miguel dropped his guitar and ran toward her, collapsing into her arms. The cameras captured it, the raw, unfiltered love of a mother and child who had weathered storms together and finally found light. The audience, already emotional, erupted into fresh applause. In that embrace was a message that needed no words, that sometimes, the greatest songs are not sung on stages but in the quiet sacrifices of love. From that day on, Miguel's life transformed. He was no longer just a boy from a forgotten street. He became a symbol of resilience, of how dreams can rise from the ashes of hardship. But more importantly, he became a reminder to millions watching at home that talent is not about perfection, it is about truth. That kindness, compassion, and belief, in oneself and in others, can lift even the heaviest burdens. Miguel's performance spread across the world, touching people from every corner of the globe. Strangers wrote letters saying his voice gave them courage to keep going. Families shared his story as proof that no dream is too small, no struggle too great. And yet, through it all, Miguel remained humble, carrying his father's guitar as a sacred reminder of where he came from, never forgetting the sacrifices that brought him here. Years later, when asked what he remembered most about that night, he never spoke of the confetti or the fame. He always said the same thing: the moment I saw my mother's eyes. That's when I knew I had already won. And perhaps that is the true golden buzzer, not the flashing lights or the glittering showers from the ceiling, but the recognition of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Because in the end, Miguel's story was not just about a boy singing a song. It was about a boy reminding the world that kindness, courage, and selflessness can transform even the darkest nights into music that never fades. And as long as hearts beat and voices rise, that song will live on, forever.